All for coming to my talk today. I'm going to be talking about overcoming imposter syndrome. But first, who am I? Hi, I'm Kristen, and I just graduated from the University of Michigan School of Information with my master's degree in human-computer interaction, which is a mouthful. And I also have been a developer for the past 4 years. Most of that has been front-end in Ruby on Rails, although in the past year I've gotten into Drupal development, which is how I have ended up at this camp. So before I talk about overcoming imposter syndrome, I'll talk a little bit about what it is, although I'm sure a lot of you probably know. So what is imposter syndrome? The very short and condensed version is it's basically the idea that you're kind of a fraud, and any success that you've had is due to luck or timing, or you've kind of tricked everyone around you into believing that you're something that you're not. And eventually everyone's going to find out that you're actually not who you say you are. So a lot of people feel like they're the only ones that have imposter syndrome. So just out of curiosity, how many people in this room have ever at any point in their life felt like they were an imposter? Yeah, almost everyone. So you may feel like you're the only one that this affects, but I promise you, you're not. Everyone around you also feels that way. An estimated 70% of people in the US have experienced imposter syndrome. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got into development, because it definitely was not something that I originally planned on doing. If you had asked me 10 years ago, what I thought I was going to do with my life, I would have told you that I was going to be an architect. That did not happen. If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have said UX researcher. So now we're getting a little bit closer. And I did actually get into tech in the first place with UX research. I started a job and they were working on this new project and they wanted to get kind of some user experience insights. They very quickly decided that they didn't really have time for that and that they really actually needed me to do front-end development. So I said, okay. About 6 months later, they were like, this is great, you've been doing all this front-end development work. What we actually need now is more back-end developers. So they switched me over into doing that. So development was definitely something that I kind of fell into. And because it wasn't something that I had a background in, I was learning a lot as I went along, which made me feel really, intimidated. I was trying this new thing and I didn't necessarily know a lot about it. I had done some programming in school, but I had never really thought of it as something I was that good at. But I thought, as I learned and as I knew more things, I would start to feel more like I belonged. But that didn't really happen. What actually happened is, even as I got more skilled in the area, I felt like I still didn't know enough, and I started to downplay the things that I did know. So I definitely thought things like, I'm only here because I got lucky. It just so happened that my job was able to transition me into doing this work, but it's not really what I'm good at. I'm not really good at this, and I don't belong here. So another area of my life that I've felt imposter syndrome is I weightlift. And at first glance, it might seem like tech and weightlifting don't really have a lot in common. Being a developer mostly requires sitting at a desk and working on a computer, whereas weightlifting is, very highly physical and seems like the complete opposite. But I would argue that they have some things in common. Both have specific terminology and languages that you have to, learn, understand, get up to speed with. They both have, accepted best practices and ways to do things. And for both, bad things can happen if you mess up. No one wants to be the one that takes down your client's production site. You also don't want to injure yourself by dropping your weights on yourself. So in both cases, I think, this kind of steep learning curve and these risks really pressured me to feel like I had to do things very well, and there was this immense pressure to succeed. So I think that was partially the reason that I felt a lot of this imposter syndrome. But maybe the bigger piece is that I don't look like a typical member of either of these groups. I put typical in quotes. Ideally, there would not be such a thing as a typical software developer or a typical weightlifter, but unfortunately, a lot of times when you say that, people think of a certain image in their mind, and it probably doesn't look like me. So, for example, the first team that I worked on, the team size fluctuated, but in general, there were always more men, and significantly more men than there were women, so I'm already one step removed from the majority. And as a queer woman, now I'm 2 steps removed from the majority. And also, might be kind of unique to my situation, because I think a lot of people think of tech workers as being younger, but on my particular team, I was the one young person with a lot of people who were almost as old as my parents. So I looked pretty different from my coworkers. And I found that the same thing happened at the gym. Usually I'm in the weight room with a bunch of men. So one day there were a lot of other women, and I got really excited about it. So, in both of these arenas of my life, I've faced imposter syndrome. But for some reason, I was able to overcome it much more quickly with weightlifting. Within a few months to a year of starting that, I kind of felt like it was a space that I was comfortable in. Whereas I'm just now starting the process of overcoming it at work, and it's been 4 years, so significantly longer. And I realized recently that a lot of things that I've started doing that have been helping me in the tech sphere, they were things that I had already done in the gym. So I kind of put together a list of things from my own experiences that I feel like really helped me to kind of push past the feeling that I don't belong and have helped me to succeed. So, I guess your mileage may vary, but I hope that these will give you some ideas of things that you could do. So the first thing is don't compare. With weightlifting, I kind of accepted that I'm not going to be good at it immediately. It was going to take time for me to, build up to being able to lift heavier weights. And I focused more on what I was capable of doing than what all the other people around me are doing. And it would be very easy to compare myself to what other people are doing, because at my gym, all the different weights are different colors. So it's really easy to look at someone's bar and tell how much they're lifting. It's very obvious. So despite that, I focused really hard on, what am I capable of doing and what can I do today, as opposed to, what's this guy next to me doing? Whereas with tech, I kind of felt like I was a failure if I didn't immediately know how to do something. And I was always comparing myself to other people, even if it was my coworkers who, had been doing this for half of my lifetime. I still felt like I needed to compare and live up to what they were doing. So I was kind of always worried about my performance. So my mentality is, I don't belong here because my skills aren't adding anything to the team. Anyone else could do the things that I'm doing, so am I really that important? And I was talking about this one time with a therapist, and he posed this scenario to me. So he said, imagine that you're watching a varsity high school football game, and one of the players is an 8th grader. He might not be the star of the team, he's not the quarterback, but he makes some really good plays, and his teammates count on him, and he's there for his teammates when they need him. What would your impression of him be? Does anyone, I'm not going to cold call because I hate being cold called, but if anyone wants to share what their impression would be. If not, I'll just share mine.
I'd be stoked for that kid, personally.
Yes.
Yeah, he's 4 years younger than everyone else and still out there, so that's props to that. Yeah.
So that was kind of my reaction. I was like, yeah, I would be pretty impressed with him. And then I was like, this is what you think I should think of myself.
I knew it was coming back.
Which, is true. Your skills do matter. And there are probably things that you might be able to do better than other people on your team, even if it doesn't seem like it. So, I was really focused on Ruby and the fact that I didn't think I was as good at Ruby as a lot of my coworkers. I was ignoring the fact that I'm way better at CSS than a lot of them. So just because there's one thing that you might not be able to do as well as others, find those things that you can do, figure out what they are, and then, feel good about them, feel proud of them. So kind of realizing that I could focus on my own skills helped me feel good about what I was accomplishing, as opposed to, feeling like I was less than, or feeling like I wasn't doing as much as other people were doing. So the next thing is, don't be afraid to ask for help. So, it's good to focus on things that you know you're good at, but sometimes there are still going to be things that you don't know. And a lot of times I was too scared to ask questions because, going back to the, feeling like a fraud, I felt like, as soon as I ask this question, I'm exposing myself as a fraud. Then people are going to know for sure that I don't actually know what I'm doing. So with weightlifting, I had no problem with this. I asked for help from people if I was unsure on how to do something, or, sometimes I wasn't able to do a full exercise and I would have to, modify it in some way or do an assisted version, and I didn't have a problem with that. But in tech, I felt this pressure that I had to figure everything out on my own. I had to have all the answers, and it was never okay to ask anyone for help. So, I thought if I ask someone this, they'll realize that I don't know what I'm doing. But no one has all the answers. Even the person who you think has all the answers, I promise you, they don't. And learning to allow myself that it's okay to ask for help, has been good in helping me build those skills and build them more quickly. Rather than struggling with something for a day, if I get to the point where I realize I need help and asking someone, then I'm able to figure it out much faster and move on to other things. And, on the flip side, I've had coworkers ask me things that, once we sat down and looked at it, it became obvious. Sometimes you just need a second pair of eyes, and it's okay to ask for that. So we should ask for help when we need it, because sometimes we will get stuck, and that's okay. Not every day is going to be perfect. Sometimes you're not going to be as productive as you want to be, or you're not going to be able to figure something out. So try not to get discouraged by that. So like with weightlifting, if I wasn't able to perform well, I blamed it more on the circumstances. So, maybe I didn't eat enough breakfast. Maybe I just got back from a 2-week vacation and I haven't worked out in 2 weeks. Maybe I have been doing a lot of really hard stuff all day, so now that I'm, on the last exercise, it's going to be a lot harder and I can't perform as well. Whereas in tech, when I had unproductive days, rather than blaming the circumstances, I blamed myself. I felt like a failure, rather than thinking, maybe I'm just having a really rough day, maybe something's going on in my personal life that's affecting me at work. I immediately jumped to, no, this is a problem with me and my abilities. So I would think things, I'm a failure because I spent all day working on a problem and I haven't solved it. But work doesn't happen in a vacuum. Life affects work and workouts. And accepting that you'll have bad days that's helped me to stop feeling like a failure when they do happen. It's just part of the process. And rather than kind of fighting that, just accepting like, okay, maybe today wasn't great, but hopefully tomorrow will be better. And not every day has to be perfect. So when we do have those tough days, it can be tough to stay motivated or, to want to continue improving. But it's important to improve, just to get better. And that also, at least for me, makes me feel more confident. So for me, it's important to work on, improving my skills. So I think a good way for me to do this has been setting goals. And I was setting goals both in weightlifting and in tech, but they turned out a little different. So in weightlifting, for example, one goal that I had was deadlift 200 pounds by the end of this month. That's a pretty good goal. I'll be able to tell if I've accomplished it by the end of June. In tech, my goals looked more like get better at coding. What does that mean? Sure, that's great, but it's pretty vague, and I don't know when I've met it. So that made me feel like, oh, I'm not really good at this. I had nothing to point to and say, this is something I've accomplished, because I was kind of just working at this nebulous thing of get better at coding. So when you're setting your goals, a couple of things to consider is pick something that's quantifiable, so you should be able to tell when you've met it, and also set a time frame, and just kind of using your best judgment of how long it will take you to accomplish something. If you don't do that, I think it's very easy. We all get busy and push things back. So that having a time frame there can help kind of keep it at the forefront and keep you on track towards meeting it. But know that it's okay to adjust it if necessary. So my deadlifting goal, originally that was by the time I graduated. I didn't quite make it, but I think the end of June is now a good timeline. So, once you set your goals, they're not set in stone, and it's okay to adjust them if you need to. Because you can't meet them if you don't know what they are. And I found that setting achievable goals has helped me to stay motivated and stay excited. So, related to goal setting, you're probably not immediately setting goals and then meeting them like the next day or the next week. It probably takes a little bit longer than that. So you're going to have multiple steps along the way. And as you kind of meet these mini deadlines, or as you work towards your goals, acknowledge the things that you are achieving, even if they're small. So like with weightlifting, I would get very excited about achievements, even if it wasn't meeting my final goal. And this is a place where it's very discreet and easy to tell. Like, I added 5 pounds to my bar this week. Like, that's an improvement from last week, which helped because it was pretty obvious. Whereas in tech, I kind of downplayed my achievements. I didn't really think that they were, all that great. And I found myself saying, when someone would tell me that I did a good job on something, a lot of times I would say it wasn't that hard, which I think at first seems like it's like modesty, or, I don't want to seem like a know-it-all and say, oh yeah, that was super easy. But I think what it's actually doing is suggesting that if it was hard, I wouldn't have been able to do it, which is not the case. I can do hard things sometimes too. All of us can. So when people acknowledge you or tell you that you've done a good job on something, it's okay to believe them. When I acknowledge others or tell them good job, I'm not lying. So I don't know why I think that they're lying when they say it to me. They're not. So take it at face value, and it's okay to accept a compliment. So I found that, taking credit for accomplishments, rather than downplaying or kind of suggesting that they're not important, has been another thing that has helped me to improve my confidence. And now, kind of like, moving on to how you can find others to help you, I found that mentorship has been another big thing. So, like in weightlifting, I worked with personal trainers and class instructors to get better. But in tech, this kind of goes back to the, feeling like I have to figure everything out on my own. I didn't really see why I needed a mentor. I should just be able to figure everything out on myself. I'm not supposed to need help. So it was never something that I sought out. I was used to relying on myself. I had this mentality that I needed to be self-sufficient all the time. And, again, with the, once I let someone else in, they're going to realize I don't know what I'm talking about. But sometimes, sometimes it's not help that you need from a mentor. Sometimes it's that extra push to do something that you didn't think that you would have been able to do, or that you wouldn't have tried otherwise. There were a lot of times when I was weightlifting that my trainer would, put way more weight on the bar than I thought I could lift, and she would make me try it, and I would lift it. Whereas, if I had been there by myself, I would have done what I felt comfortable with and not pushed on to do anything more. So being able to find mentors that have pushed me has been another thing that has helped me to get better and to improve my skills. And then, having someone that you consider a mentor is good, but on the flip side, it can also be really helpful to mentor other people. So, like with weightlifting, maybe a little less like direct mentorship, but I, talked about it with a lot of friends and how much I enjoyed it and encouraged other people to try it and get involved. Friends who did weightlift, talking about it with them and like helping them with their practice if they were having trouble with, a certain aspect of something. Whereas with tech, I kind of felt like I wasn't skilled enough to be helping other people. So like at school in some of my classes, I would help friends with coursework, and that was fine. This is just me helping my friends. It was very low risk, and my friends didn't have super high expectations for that, so that was okay. But I had signed up for a tutoring list at school, and the first time that I got an email from someone, reaching out to find out if I would be able to tutor them, I kind of hesitated because they wanted help with SQL, which was something that I had used, but I wouldn't really consider it maybe my strongest suit. And I hesitated because I felt like, am I good enough to be able to get paid by someone to help them do this? Which is not a good mentality. But I was, thinking I'm not knowledgeable enough to teach someone else this. Or they're not going to benefit from me trying to teach this to them. But I actually did the tutoring job, and I was actually knowledgeable enough. And the person told me that they, really understood the material a lot better after they had had a couple sessions with me, and they had increased their performance on their next exam significantly. So even though I was kind of hesitant at first and didn't think I was going to be an asset to them, it turned out that I was. And sometimes I would say to them, you know what, I'm not sure about this problem, give me a couple days and I'll get back to you with the answer on that, or I'll get back to you next time we meet up. And that was okay. Again, you don't have to have all the answers. So everyone is an expert at something, and figure out what that something is and mentor other people. In one of my classes at school, we had someone teaching that was trying to convince students to go and speak at mid-camp in Chicago. And something that he told us was, anyone in this room could go speak on something. All of you right now are an expert at something. And my, immediate reaction was, no, that's not true. But I ended up going and I spoke, and a couple of my other classmates also went. And after we came back, at the next class, he had us stand up in front of everyone and, asked us how our talks went, and we all said that they went well. And then he said, and was it true that everyone in the audience at your talks thought of you as an expert at the topic you were presenting on? And we all said yes. So he said, see, it's true. You are all an expert at something. So, mentoring and teaching others and, finding those things that you are an expert in and that you do feel comfortable mentoring others in is another thing that can help, has helped me accept my skills and, again, figure out what things that I'm good at and where I feel most comfortable. So I talked about finding mentors and mentoring others. Where do you find these people? Getting involved in the community, which is where everyone here comes in. So like with weightlifting, I connected with other people who, had the similar interests and would talk about it with. I have one friend in particular that, we text each other all the time about, what things we've accomplished, or, if we have a bad day, supporting each other and telling each other that it's going to be better next time. Whereas with tech, I didn't really think that, I would add any value to a community, and I also didn't really recognize what kind of value I would get out of it. So I felt like, I don't need to get involved. I don't really have anything to contribute to this. It's cool that there are people interested in what I'm interested in over there, but I'm just going to stay over here. They probably don't want to hear from me. That is not true. Anyone can contribute and be part of the community. Like I was just at DrupalCon this year for my first time, and I took part in the sprints, which was kind of intimidating at first, but I worked with some awesome people, and I ended up making my first patch on a module while I was there, which, you know, if you had told me like 4 months ago that I was going to do that, I probably would not have believed it. So anyone really can contribute. So even though I haven't been involved in the community for a super long time, I feel like I've gotten a lot of support, and again, it's something that's helped me improve my skills. I mean, and I've just met some really awesome people, so it's been a good experience. So a lot of things that I've talked about is, you know, skills and feeling comfortable. And if you remember from the beginning of my presentation, I talked about how I don't really maybe look like what people think of when they think of these communities. So something that's been helpful to me is finding those other people who do look like me, who are doing awesome things, and, you know, being inspired by them. So in weightlifting, I found other women who I think are awesome. For example, I don't know if any of you have heard of Casey Catanzaro. She was the first woman to complete a qualifying course for American Ninja Warrior. And I have a short video, which hopefully will play.
Well, Casey Catanzaro last year made it to the 5th obstacle, one of the best performances we've ever seen out of a woman. This year has been training with Brent Stephenson. She's able to get up the warp wall in training. Can she be the first woman ever to do it in competition?
Well, before she can do that, she has to conquer some very challenging obstacles, starting with the log grip.
You got this, Casey. You got this.
This could be a difficult obstacle for her
As a smaller woman.
as a smaller woman.
You know, she can't reach around the log with her arms or legs, so she has to rely solely on her grip strength on this one.
And just locked in. Catanzaro. Again, she was a Division I Gymnast of the Year out of Towson University.
At 5 feet tall, she has a lot of distance to cover with her small stride.
Keep in mind, this is what took out Nika McElroy. Took her out hard. Whoa, a little slip, but Catanzaro threw it. Look at the crowd, they're getting excited.
Well, now here's the thing. With the swing jump, this is one of the only places that her weight is a disadvantage. She has to get this thing swinging to avoid a large distance when she leaps.
She's got it. Oh, a slip with the feet, but she holds on. You can see this woman is so strong. Just 100 pounds, but all of it muscle. But here, we talked to her beforehand. She said the one obstacle she was concerned about was the ring toss. Not because of necessarily the upper body strength, but because of the reach, 5 feet tall. A couple of women have made it to the ring toss tonight, but none has gotten past it. This is a real test.
A person's wingspan is about the same as their height, so Casey can only reach out about 5 feet from the end of one outstretched arm to the other.
Casey has to be feeling the nerves now that she's inching her way closer to that warped wall. Only 2 women have ever made it past the 5th obstacle in American Ninja Warrior history.
One of the hardest parts is coming up, which is transferring to the next plank. This is where her reach will be tested.
Hung up here. She recovers and makes the first transfer. Woohoo! Good recovery that of Catanzaro.
Stay calm.
Those arms have to be burning. We're on the verge.
So close. And Casey, don't leap too soon. Get to the 3rd plank. That's the key here.
This transition so difficult. The dismount has claimed so many athletes tonight. Catanzaro feet away from doing it.
Do you think she smells victory here? Do you think she smells victory here?
And making sure putting those rungs as close to the end as she can. And she's done it! Casey Catanzaro!
That's it!
Matching the best performance we've ever seen by a woman. Nika McElroy and Jessie Graff, the only 2 others ever to complete 5 obstacles. And now, the warp wall standing between her and history. We've seen her do it in training with Brent. We know she can do this.
With the crowd standing at their feet, her boyfriend Brent Stephenson to her left.
6 seasons of American Ninja Warrior, no woman has ever completed the qualifying course. Catanzaro looking to make history. Oh! Her fingers just grazed the top of the wall, missing by inches. This is it. Again, Division I gymnast. She's used to performing when pressure's at its highest, and the pressure has never been higher than this moment.
She's only 5 feet tall. That means the warp wall is almost 3 times taller than her.
Utter silence in the crowd.
I have to figure out how to get my mouse back over on my other screen. Okay, so, not directly weightlifting, but you have to be pretty strong to complete that obstacle course. And as a 5-foot-tall woman, Casey does not look like the typical contestant on American Ninja Warrior, but she still killed it. She stumbled a couple times along the way, but she still, and then she still got up that wall. So, identifying people like that who also, don't necessarily look like typical members of the weightlifting or obstacle course community has been really helpful to me in seeing, hey, there are people who look like me that are doing awesome things. Maybe one day I can also do awesome things. Maybe not this awesome unless I, quit my job and start training full time, but still awesome. Whereas in tech, I wasn't really looking beyond my, circle of coworkers and people in my immediate vicinity, and I didn't really look like them. So, I was thinking, I don't look like my coworkers. Maybe I don't belong here. So, representation matters, and sometimes you're not going to see that in your immediate surroundings, unfortunately. So sometimes you do need to seek it out more proactively. So I found that finding other people who look like me and who excel and who are doing awesome things has been helpful in making me feel like I belong and can be part of the community. And this one I'm actually still working on for tech. I haven't really identified any great role models yet, so anyone who has suggestions, let me know.
Becoming one.
That's true. I could work on becoming one. I'll write a goal. So, takeaways from the presentation. Your skills matter. Even if you think that other people can do things just as well, you can do them well too, and you still have value to provide to a team. No one has all the answers, so don't be afraid to ask people when you have questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question, and it's a great way to learn. Life affects work, so accept that not every day is going to be great, and if you're having a relationship problem or some other kind of problems in your life, sometimes that means that maybe your work is going to suffer a little bit, and that's okay. You'll get back to the place that you were at. You can't meet your goals if you don't know what they are, so set actionable goals that will keep you excited and inspired to get through those rough days. And along the way to meeting your goals, when people acknowledge you for things, believe them. If they say that you're doing a great job, take it at face value and believe that you are. Sometimes you need to find someone else that can give you a push to go further than you would have been able to on your own, and that's okay. Everyone's an expert at something, so find that thing that you're an expert at and teach others, get other people excited about it, help mentor others in that subject. Anyone can contribute. Don't hold off because you feel like you don't know enough or you're not ready yet. You are, and you'll figure it out as you go along, and that's okay. And hopefully there will be lots of people around you who will help support you on that process. And then finally, representation matters. So if you look a little different from everyone around you, seek out the people who look like you, and know that you do belong in the community. And finally, maybe the biggest takeaway, overcoming imposter syndrome takes a lot of time, like 4+ years and counting. So it's not going to happen overnight, and that's okay. But I hope that this has given you all some ideas that you can take away in working at overcoming imposter syndrome in your own lives, whether in tech or in any other arena. So thank you. And if anyone has any questions or want to share your own personal stories, I would be happy to hear.
I'm just wondering if we can brainstorm a list of role models, since you don't have any, and I'm wondering, there's lots of smart folks in this room who know lots of folks, and so if you're looking for someone in UX or UI, maybe we can connect you?
I'd say web chick would be the immediate one. You know.
If there's a specific discipline.
I mean, for me personally, I've found that my thing that I'm an expert at is front-end development.
Okay, well, Jen Simmons is great. Jen Simmons is queer, super visible.
Love it, love it.
And I can make an introduction if you'd like.
That would be amazing. So, thank you, community, coming through.
Have you ever thought about speaking professionally?
No.
You're almost there. You have an excellent slide deck. You have an excellent message. You even have some really good presentations. You have a couple of ticks, but you've got it.
Thank you. I'm actually pretty terrified of public speaking, so it feels good to hear that you liked my presentation.
What are some tangible goals that you've found in programming? Because you talked about how weightlifting, it's easy. You know, you have pounds. That's how it is. When I started climbing, I can go by grading. I can say, I can conquer that next whatever grade. But it does seem like in work or programming, I'm just getting started in getting to learn this kind of stuff, and goals are, you're right, better at programming is just not a good goal, and I just wondered if you have had any goals in the past that's more tangible.
I was actually thinking about that in, the past few weeks since I was going to talk about it here. So not necessarily specifically programming related, but one of my goals now is, so this talk is obviously a little bit more on the community side. One of my goals is to try and do a more technical talk by the end of next year. So that's tech related, but not programming related. I guess for someone starting out, I would say, maybe if there are courses online that you're working through, kind of identifying ones that you think are going to be helpful to you and maybe setting a deadline to completing those. Or something else that I have been interested in doing and may try and make it a goal if I have enough free time, is working on, I have a website that I've built for myself that's just HTML and CSS. But since I've been, getting more interested in Drupal, I want to look at rebuilding it using Drupal and maybe, adding some features like a blog. So I'm kind of in the process of figuring out what that site might look like and, what a timeline for that might be. So does that help? So if there's, something that you think would be really cool to build, I don't know, a shopping list app or a personal website, maybe think about that and think about kind of a timeline for completing it.
Really helps if you're interested in what you're working on too.
Yes.
There are some other measures I can think of if you're interested.
Okay.
One of the things that you said you did for the first time was commit a patch back to the community, right? The number of things that you commit back over time. If you want to increase that over time, that's something that you could track and measure so that you're participating more in that kind of thing. Or you could look at your results from code reviews, right? Or other if you have other work qualitative or quantitative measures that you're using, you can put those down. But one of the things that came to mind when you were talking about goals, there's this classic pattern of talking about goals that are SMART, right? And they're specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time sensitive. But so over the last year or so, I've lost over 100 pounds. And one of the things that came to my attention, I started writing a guide about how I did that, and one of the things that came to my attention is that the goals themselves, like having goals may not be enough, right? Having goals that are like super flexible is a big thing. Like, so you have wide margins so that you can fail. So I'm like, if I lose half of what I want to lose in this period of time, that's success. If I lose 75%, that's great success. If I lose 100%, that's an effing miracle. And that's where I put it. And I thought that that to me ended up being really useful to be able to say that the goal itself is something that can flex. So it can be something like, I want to do 50 commits in the next year. If I do 25 commits, that's fantastic. That's good enough. If I do 40, that's amazing. But if I do 50, that's like just peak performance. That's stellar. But like giving yourself that latitude, I found that every time I got to 50, like every time I hit like over the top just by having the latitude, because it lets you forgive yourself, and you don't need it because it's like you said, you're going to stumble.
Mm-hmm.
My question would be then is like, how do you, I find it difficult to motivate myself sometimes to just plunge myself into it.
Just knowing that it's okay to fail makes you want to plunge. Like you're like, I could fail, but I also have the choice to not. Like I really don't understand. It's some kind of weird psychological magic. I don't get it at all. But it works. It's good. Like if you can forgive yourself, it changes everything.
I think also it goes back to what you were saying about finding something that you're interested in. Like I know those are the projects that I have the most success in. Those are the times that I'm sitting there writing code for 5 hours and I don't realize it. Because I've been sitting there figuring things out and it's been fun and it's been something that I've been interested in. So I think that's also a really good point.
So it may be interesting to look at your goals and actually change your goals based on how interested you are in something. It's kind of like where I'm working at. Sometimes you set up goals that may be beneficial, or you feel like may be beneficial, but there's times when I just don't achieve those because I'm just not interested. Yeah.
So maybe realistic changes depending on what you're looking at.
Yeah, because I wouldn't consider that attainable.
Yeah.
I mean, you just missed that. It's like, if you're not into it, then it's not going to happen. And then I feel like it compounds because then you failed something you didn't even want to do.
Guilt avoidance.
And it's just like, what the hell did I do to myself?
Maybe you thought you wanted to do it. I mean,
Or just usually it happens for the wrong reason. Somebody else wants you to do it, and you don't really want to do it, and then you're like, dang. And then you get the double whammy.
Dang.
Dang.
Oh well.
All right, well, if no one has any other questions or comments, thank you again for your questions. They were great. And yeah, I hope that you are all now empowered to go out and start conquering imposter syndrome.